Miracles do happen. A gorgeously imaginative new musical is now on Broadway. Water for Elephants is a New York Times critic's pick. It's stunning, emotional, spellbinding entertainment. A dazzling love story, propulsive with passion. Don't miss the best new musical on Broadway. Water for Elephants. Get tickets now at telecharge.com and choose the ride.
Seven things you don't really need to know, but probably should. I'm Ciara Revin, and this is the Sunday 7.
Welcome to another edition of the award-winning Sunday 7. On today's episode, we hear from Britain's latest astronaut. We find out what happens next for TikTok after a potential US ban becomes law. We hear about a pig kidney transplant and dig into Otto-Breuer syndrome. But first, on this day in 1919, the first manually operated parachute jump was carried out above Dayton, Ohio by the US Army. Leslie Leroy Irvine jumped at an altitude of 1,500 feet from a de Havilland biplane and opened the parachute himself, landing on the MC Cook airfield. He did break his ankle on landing, but went on to found a parachute business. This week saw Rosemary Coogan become Northern Ireland's first official astronaut. She was one of 6 candidates to complete basic astronaut training at the European Space Agency. Rosemary is an astrophysicist with 2 master's degrees from Durham University and an astronomy doctorate from Sussex University. She's only the UK's 3rd official astronaut after Helen Sharman, who was the first Briton in space back in 1989, and Tim Peake. She spoke to Sky News this week and she says she's delighted the first part of training is over and she's ready for the next big step.
I'm so excited. I feel like I'm finishing one part of the journey. You know, we're finishing our basic training, which is fantastic after 1 year, but it really is just the first of many steps to get into space. It really is a really, really exciting time actually for our training and for the space community as a whole.
The training was pretty comprehensive, including diving, survival skills and medicine, but Rosemary says some of the requirements surprised her.
I wasn't expecting to be having a course in photography during basic training, but actually it's an incredibly important tool to use on the space station. Some of the particularly amazing outreach that we do, as well as kind of comparing how the Earth looks between one mission to the next, which is obviously really important for how our Earth is changing. But a lot of the important communication we do is done by taking pictures of the Earth. It's a fantastic vantage point from the ISS. So indeed, things like photography training were certainly a big surprise. But it's just been a really broad training in everything from engineering and systems to the practical trainings as well.
Libby Jackson is the head of space exploration at the UK Space Agency, and she says future astronauts need a wide range of skills.
This is the basic training that the European Space Agency provide to all of their astronaut candidates. Rosemary and her fellow classmates were selected at the end of 2022. They spent a year basically getting everybody up to speed in everything that you need to know to be an astronaut. The people have come from different backgrounds. Some of them are pilots. Rosemary is an astrophysicist. There's doctors, a whole mix of people. So they've been in the classroom. They've been learning about the science experiments that take place on the International Space Station, and then they've been doing some practical training skills. They've done survival training, and just this week they've been on a parabolic flight to experience what weightlessness is like. So they have done all sorts of things.
2024 definitely seems like the year that big tech met big lawyers, with news stories every week about lawsuits against a range of tech companies. This week saw 2 major battles at government level: the Australian government versus X's Elon Musk and the US government versus TikTok. When global tech gets in the ring, there's only one man we want to see holding the scorecards, and that is the Smart 7's tech guru Will Guyatt. So Will, big tech is under pressure. Let's start with TikTok. What happened this week?
It's been long suggested that the US government was going to work out a way to either force the Chinese business ByteDance to sell TikTok, and this week a second US law came into being and was rapidly approved to make this happen. In theory, when this or the previous law get enacted, ByteDance will have up to a year to get out of the business in the US. Expect this to get legal and very hot quickly, with both sides battling out, and this 12 months will probably extend 2 years before customers in the US potentially lose TikTok.
What was the TikTok response? Are they prepared to be sold?
ByteDance published on its Chinese news platform Toutao that it had no plans to sell TikTok in the US, while anonymous sources speaking to The Guardian and other outlets suggested that ByteDance would rather shut TikTok down in the US than break up the business or be forced to reveal information about the prized algorithm at the centre of the platform to a potential buyer. And if you're wondering what on earth an algorithm is, it's the thing that makes TikTok so compelling. It's the reason why you keep scrolling through that feed on your phone. We don't yet fully know what the response is going to be, but there has been some suggestion that TikTok will attempt to call on the 170 million plus Americans on the platform to suggest that this forced sale or closure is against the First Amendment of the US Constitution, and that protects free speech.
What has Elon been up to? How did he get into a row with Australia?
Now, we all know that Elon Musk paints himself as the protector of free speech, perhaps not when it comes to his own staff, but naturally he's now gone toe-to-toe with Australia's new e-safety commissioner. Following some recent tragedies in Australia, social networks have been asked by this commissioner to remove sensitive videos of an attack in a church. Meta, ByteDance, Google and Snapchat all quickly complied with requests, whereas X initially took down posts and then fired back with a free speech lawsuit, refusing to take down more requests. The back and forth has now continued for a couple of weeks, and Musk is even bragging that his free speech approach has led to X becoming Australia's #1 source of news. Australia's PM gave the entrepreneur a harsh and public slap this week by calling him an arrogant billionaire. I predict that Musk will continue riding this till the wheels fall off and the lawsuit will fold when he believes nobody is paying attention.
Are the days of global tech platforms numbered? Will regulations see a more fragmented version of social media?
Talk about putting me on the spot with that question. It's hard to see how tech companies are going to remain as big and powerful as they are right now. The EU is going into bat to legally hold the tech companies to account, as are we here in the UK through our online safety bill. And that's before we look at the US, Australia and other countries doing similar things. I reckon we're going to see different variations of services depending on where we live, but not before a hellish battle between lawyers on all sides. The lawyers are going to make a lot of money.
There was some good news for European electronic consumers this week. What are the new guidelines on right to repair?
Yeah, this is a decent reason to celebrate if you live in Europe. Companies are going to be forced under law to make their products easier to fix. And that's after the EU calculated that 35 million tonnes of tech got dumped every year, and that could have been reasonably repaired. It's going to become easier and cheaper to repair instead of buying new items, and give consumers a choice to fight climate change. Once fully approved, EU countries are going to have 2 years to properly roll this out.
Will we get anything similar in the UK, or has Brexit done us over?
Well, I didn't realise we had our own right to repair rules already here in the UK, and I do this tech stuff for a living. It was put into law in 2021 and only really applies currently to white goods like your trusty dishwasher. And unlike the EU, the cost of these repairs is totally unregulated. So you might find that flange valve might cost you more than an entire dishwasher.
And finally, we saw Apple invites going out for the next big event on May 7th. What are we expecting, Will?
The joy of Apple is that you never really know what's being revealed until the glitzy pre-recorded presentation begins. The business news site CNBC has led with suggestions this week that Apple will reveal an entirely new iPad range, having not launched any new models of the tablet since late 2022. The Apple speculation train will also then reappear again before the company's worldwide developer conference in June, and the rumours already suggest that will be a very AI-heavy event.
Still to come in the Sunday 7, an unusual kidney transplant, and Europe's at real risk from heat. A woman called Lisa Pisano has just made medical history in New York. She became only the second person to receive a transplant of a genetically modified pig kidney, and also the first person to receive a heart pump at the same time. Doctors in the New York University's Langone Transplant Institute carried out the twin procedures, which could potentially open the door for more people to receive the groundbreaking double surgery. The number of people waiting for organs, particularly kidneys, far exceeds the supply, so doctors are hoping success with genetically modified pig organs will allow the waiting list to be tackled much faster. The woman who went through the procedure, Lisa Pisano, spoke to the CBS morning show about how much she needed the operation.
I couldn't go up the stairs, I couldn't drive, I couldn't play with my grandkids. So when this opportunity came to me, I said, I'm taking it.
Dr. Robert Montgomery is the chair of the Department of Surgery and a director at the Transplant Institute, and he led the team doing the operation. He says there was a dramatic moment in theatre.
So you release the clamps and Lisa's blood goes into the kidney, and it suddenly turns this beautiful pink color. A healthy organ. This isn't just about keeping somebody alive. It's restoring them to their lives.
As we head into another summer season in the Northern Hemisphere, there's a real concern that we could see a repeat of some of the bruising heat waves we've seen across southern Europe. Italy, Greece and Spain all struggled high extended temperatures last summer, and the EU's Copernicus Climate Research Project is warning that last year's heat waves, which affected 41% of southern Europe, could return. The extreme heat can cause all kinds of physical discomfort and danger for the human body, with deaths related to heat rising by 30% in the last 20 years. The risk is particularly high for the elderly, those with long-term health conditions and those who work outdoors. Carlo Buonotempo is a director of the Copernicus Climate Change Service and says governments need to be more prepared this summer.
The year, as you know, has globally been extremely unusual, especially when compared with the climate of the last few decades, centuries, or even millennia. So some of the events of 2023 took the scientific community by surprise because of their intensity, their speed of onset, extent, and duration.
Still to come on the Sunday 7, how AI is helping find new medicines and what happens when your body gets you drunk.
Right after this.
Miracles do happen. A gorgeously imaginative new musical is now on Broadway. Water for Elephants is a New York Times Critics' Pick. It's stunning, emotional, spellbinding entertainment. A dazzling love story, propulsive with passion. Don't miss the best new musical on Broadway. Water for Elephants. Get tickets now at telecharge.com and choose the ride.
Welcome back.
One of the areas in which AI has proven itself to be useful has been medicine, whether it's moving quickly through methodical tasks like checking scans or crunching numbers on DNA projects. It's enabled some critical projects to move much faster. Now, scientists at London's Royal Botanical Gardens have put AI to work on deciphering the plant tree of life. They're looking for new solutions, not just for medicine, but also potentially for projects as far-ranging as climate change, food insecurity and conservation. So far, they've looked at more than 9,500 flowering plants. And Melanie Jane Hose is a senior research leader at Kew. She says they're hopeful of unlocking some major discoveries.
So by understanding accurately, as from this data set, how plants are related, this can enable us to understand how plants might have evolved and how they might have similar characteristics or properties that have enabled them, for example, to survive in their own environments, but also, again, to help us identify which traits are common to closely related species to help us with potentially finding solutions to many challenges.
A Belgian man made headlines this week after he had a drink driving charge against him dismissed in court. He'd been stopped by police a number of times and had registered a high blood alcohol level, even though he claimed he hadn't been drinking. He underwent a series of medical tests and it turns out he has a rare condition called ABS, or Otter-Brody syndrome. Essentially, your body turns carbohydrates into alcohol because of bacteria in your gut, even if you haven't been drinking. UK doctor and TikTok star Dr. Sarmed Mezer explains how the test can differentiate between regular alcohol and someone with ABS.
There are a few different factors here, but one of them is called a carbohydrate challenge test, where patients given more than 200 grams of glucose to consume, and then their blood alcohol levels are measured at regular intervals up until 8 hours after consumption. This is all in a controlled environment to make sure they don't have access to alcohol to interfere with the test, and then if their blood alcohol levels spike, it confirms the diagnosis.
Dr. Payal Kohli, who's a cardiologist and a specialist in internal medicine, says once the disease is diagnosed, there's a fairly straightforward treatment plan.
That's usually a multimodality approach, usually probiotics to sort of restore the good organisms, some kind of antifungals or antibiotics or combination of both types of medicines to kill the bad bacteria or bad yeast that's causing this kind of fermentation, and then changing some of your dietary patterns.
We heard recently on the Sunday 7 that the world's oceans are experiencing another mass coral bleaching event as sea temperatures rise. Now a zoo in the Netherlands has begun a project intended to preserve coral species in case of extinction, a kind of ocean-based Noah's Ark. The World Coral Conservatory has taken lab-grown versions of different species and placed them in an aquarium which they can regulate temperature and conditions in to ensure that they continue to survive. The hope is that one day the lab-grown corals could be used to help repair damaged coral reefs in the wild. Ninky Clerks is a biologist at the Burger Zoo.
This is the first project where we started to keep these corals with a known origin. So as we know exactly where they're coming from, they have the potential to be placed back into the wild, on degraded reefs, for example. So that's very important to keep these corals, as it's going not very well in the wild.
This has been the Sunday 7. Wherever you're listening, do us a favour and hit the follow button. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. with the regular Smart 7. Have a great rest of your weekend. Written, produced and published by Daft Doris.
Miracles do happen. A gorgeously imaginative new musical is now on Broadway. Water for Elephants is a New York Times Critics' Pick. It's stunning, emotional, spellbinding entertainment. A dazzling love story, propulsive with passion. Don't miss the best new musical on Broadway. Water for Elephants. Get tickets now at telecharge.com and choose the ride.